speak about honour. I believe that love is spelled honour. What I mean by that is that it means nothing for me to say that I love somebody if I don't back that up with some kind of demonstration, if I don't demonstrate that love in some way. And love is demonstrated with honour. Romans 12 verse 9 and 10 puts this beautifully. The heading is love in action. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honour one another above yourselves. Now, honour should be the priority of our behaviour. Treating people with honour means elevating their status. It means treating them better than they deserve to be treated. Who knows that what we deserve from God and what we get from God are often two really different things. When the prodigal son returned to his father, he deserved nothing more than what he asked for, to be taken on and treated like a servant. What he received was the best robe, a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet, a feast and a celebration. God gives us the status of his children. He dresses us in honour. He has no reason to do this except that he loves us. One of the New Zealanders I really admire was Sir Edmund Hillary. He was a giant of a man. If during his life he'd walked through those doors, he would have caused an immediate response. People would have turned to look. If he were announced from the front, people would have clapped, risen to their feet, perhaps. I would have. In that moment, I would have thought of Sir Ed's great exploits. I would have thought of how he climbed Everest and his exploits on some of the mountains I have climbed around Nelson. I would have thought of his great humanitarian work, the images of the people of Nepal draping scarves around his neck, the things he did for the poor. I would honour Sir Ed for those things. The funny thing is, though, that in doing that, I am honouring him for all the things he has done that are important to me. I am enormously proud that a Kiwi was the first to stand on the roof of the world and that it was such a humble bloke. I have a deep admiration for people who use their status to raise the profile of those who are less fortunate. Through his work, many schools and hospitals have been built in the Himalayas. I value those things. That kind of honour is really all about me. What I'm saying is, if you do things that are important to me, if you don't do things that are important to me, you're not worthy of honour from me. And Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 46 and 47, if you love only those who love you, what good is that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that. And if you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. Verse 48 of Matthew 5 is also fantastic, by the way. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. If I only honour those who do things that are important to me, what good am I? That's a challenging concept to grasp. Sure, I would stand and applaud Sir Ed. But Luke 15 verse 20 says that while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. He didn't just stand. He ran to someone who had utterly rejected him, and he welcomed him with joy. That is biblical honour. Sorry. I'll tell you something that definitely is not biblical honour, and that's burning yourself out trying to please people. It's something you have to watch very carefully, because it can look so much like honour to us that we cannot tell the difference. It's really interesting to look at the way Jesus managed boundaries in his life and in his relationships. First and foremost, Jesus spent time with his Father. In Luke 5 verse 15 to 16 it says, "Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses." People were very important to Jesus, no question about it. And at this point in his ministry, he was just becoming famous. But he didn't wake up in the morning, spend all day ministering, then crawl into bed at night. In verse 16 it says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." God is always the most important thing in our lives, and we must always make time to connect with him. We must always make sure we are doing what pleases him and not what is dictated to us by our circumstances. The people Jesus spent the most time with during his ministry were his disciples, and here he had 3 distinct groups. There were the 12 whom Jesus called together, and within that there were the 3 close ones, Peter, James, and John, who are singled out a number of times in the book of Mark, in chapter 5, verse 37, 9, verse 2, and 14, verse 33. And then there was the one whom Jesus loved, mentioned in John 13, verse 23. Outside of this group was a wider circle of family and friends. Then there were the crowds who followed Jesus. And finally the world, including those who hated him from the beginning. Now we are absolutely the same. We generally have one person in our lives who is closer to us than anyone else in the world. Then we have a small circle of very close friends or family. Our wider family, our church family. Christians in general perhaps. And then the world at large. The thing is that we have to choose, just like Jesus did, in which circles we're going to invest our time so that we don't bleed ourselves dry. And honor looks different in each circle that we operate in. We are always first and foremost to be available to be used by God. If he leads us to buy a tank of petrol for a total stranger, then he can do that. He is the center. But I once heard a great example of the different ways we should honor people. Let's say your computer breaks. The screen goes black, you turn it on, and all it does is beep at you. And you ring me up and ask me for help. If you're in one of my outer circles, I might say to you, look, I know this fantastic guy in town. Here's his name, you should go and see him, he'll take care of you. If you're one of my close friends, I might say, bring it round and we'll take a look at it. And if you're my wife, I'll most likely start mentally adding up the cost of a new computer. 3 very different reactions. Each one shows honor. Each one shows love and concern to the person, but we must take care not to fall into the trap of thinking that everyone deserves the same action from us just because they ask. When you truly honor people, you stand out as different, totally counter to the world. I love what Jesus says in verse 8 to 11 of Luke 14. If you are invited to a wedding feast, don't always head for the best seat. What if someone more respected than you has been invited? The host will say, let this person sit there instead. Then you will be embarrassed and will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. Do this instead. Sit at the foot of the table. Then when the host sees you, he will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you will be honored in front of all of the other guests. For the proud will be humbled, but the humble will be honored. That kind of behavior sticks out. People notice that. Plus you meet some really interesting people at the foot of the table. Of course, sitting in the lowest place doesn't mean people have to honor you, but there's nothing worse than being taken down a peg or two. Believing I have the right to be treated with honor is treading on very dangerous ground, because nobody is going to enforce that right, except for me. And if I am going to try to enforce my right to be honored, that means I am going to have to try to control your behavior. And control is the opposite of honor. There is, after all, only one person in this world that you have the right to control, and that person is you. I cannot make you behave with honor, but I can make me behave with honor. If honor means humbling yourself, promoting others, and raising one another's status, then control means promoting yourself, tearing down one another, and seeking to make those around you weak. In order for me to become more powerful, I must make you less powerful. I love how beautifully Jesus blew this concept away. He got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist, then poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet. I mean, imagine sitting there in that room waiting for your turn, while the God who made heaven and earth in human form took on the attitude of the lowest servant. It was too much for Peter. He said, "No, you will never wash my feet." Jesus replied, "If I don't wash you, you won't belong to me." And isn't God amazing? You know, that he is so big, so powerful, so awesome. And yet he chooses not just to not control us, but to give us his power. Jesus honors us in John 15, verse 15. "I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I have chosen you." I mean, that means nobody can ever claim to have earned the grace that God pours out. "And appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last." And do the things that we do in our own name to honor ourselves ever last? But we have the opportunity to invest our time, our money, our resources, the things that God has given to us, into fruit that will last forever. But here's the key. "You did not choose me, but I have chosen you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you." Wow. And this is my command. The only thing I'm asking in return, the only catch, the only fine print, the only requirement: love. Love each other. And love is spelled honor. Love each other, honor each other, promote, raise up, elevate, care for, treasure, encourage, bless one another. If you do, God promises to give you his power. And the greatest goal of our lives should be to use his power to make him famous. I want to play a short video for you now. It was played at a church we visited in the States at the beginning of 2012, and I think it illustrates this concept really well. It speaks to issues of honor, power, and control. This is Stacey Westfall's performance at the 2006 All-American Quarter Horse Congress. Now, a horse is a really powerful animal, and to ride one, you need to train not only yourself, but the horse as well. You also need a saddle and a bridle and reins and stirrups, because without those things, you're not going to have any control. And when you're sitting on top of half a ton of raw power, not having control is scary. To ride a horse without a saddle and a bridle and reins and stirrups must mean a tremendous amount of extra training. But it also means letting go of control and going after something entirely different. It means building a relationship where you understand and trust each other completely. It means hard work, hours and weeks and months and years of practice. But the reward is that both are free. This is a really simple performance with only 3 or 4 elements. But I find it a really moving picture of what it's like to move with the freedom and power of the Holy Spirit. He is so powerful. We are so weak. And yet, if we let go of control, we can move together as one. So you could play the video now, and then we'll get the worship team to come up.
This will be draw 3, exhibitor number 3353, Wizards Baby Doll, owned by Greg Gessner of Strasburg, Ohio. Stacey Westfall will be riding. Stacey Westfall and Wizards Baby Doll. Stacey would like to dedicate this ride to her dad, who went to live in heaven just 24 days ago. Thanks for teaching me to keep trying new things. Stacey Westfall.
He said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me, and a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talk about sweet time. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what you do? And he said, I went skydiving, I went climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I loved deeper, and I smoked sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I could deny it. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. He said I was finally the husband, and most of the time I wasn't. And I became a friend would like to have. And all of a sudden going fishing wasn't such an imposition. And I went 3 times that year, I lost my dad. Well, I finally read the good book, and I took a good long hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all again. And then I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I could deny it. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. Like tomorrow was a gift, and you got eternity. Think about what you do with it. What did you do with it? What did I do with it? What did I do with it? Skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. And I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I watched the eagle as it was flying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. To live like you were
I was talking to my daughter yesterday about what the world sees when it looks at us. A bunch of people following some rules that were written down thousands of years ago. And I think what we need to show the world is that knowing the Father means experiencing total and complete freedom. I really want to encourage you to honor one another in the way that you live your life, not to seek to control others by your behavior, but to make people feel important, to build them up and encourage them. Practice honor in your life to God and the people around you. Oh Lord, I really want to thank you for this house, for our time together this morning. And I pray that as we go out into this week, Lord, I pray that you would just fill us with your power, fill us with your freedom. Open our eyes to see the incredible power and liberty that we have from knowing you. In Jesus' name, amen.
let's honor God and praise Him. I just encourage you now, after